The United States economy is one of the most complex and influential economic systems in the world. Understanding its structure and components is essential for grasping how modern economies function. The U.S. operates as a mixed economy, combining the efficiency of free markets with necessary government intervention. This system harnesses the power of private enterprise while providing essential regulations and public services. Now let's examine the scale and significance of the U.S. economy on the global stage. The United States has the world's largest economy, with a gross domestic product of approximately $27 trillion. This represents about 1/4 of global economic output. The U.S. economy is characterized by three key features that set it apart from other economies worldwide. First, the U.S. economy benefits from its vast size, spanning 50 states with over 330 million people, creating enormous domestic markets and diverse regional economies. Second, the economy demonstrates remarkable diversity, encompassing everything from agriculture and manufacturing to cutting-edge services and financial markets. Third, the United States leads in technological advancement, driving innovation through research and development that creates new industries and transforms existing ones. These components work together in a complex web of interactions that we'll explore throughout this series, starting with the key sectors that drive economic activity. The U.S. economy is organized into two primary sectors that work together to create the goods and services we use every day. Understanding these sectors helps us see how our economy functions. The economy divides into two main sectors. The goods sector produces physical, tangible products that we can touch and hold. The services sector provides intangible activities and experiences that benefit consumers and businesses. The goods sector includes three main industries. Manufacturing creates products like cars, electronics, and machinery. Construction builds homes, offices, and infrastructure. Agriculture produces food, crops, and livestock that feed the nation. The services sector is much more diverse and includes finance, like banking and insurance, healthcare services from hospitals and clinics, education from schools and universities, and retail businesses that sell goods to consumers. Now let's look at the actual numbers to understand which sector dominates the American economy. The services sector completely dominates the U.S. economy, accounting for approximately 80% of total economic output. The goods sector, while essential, represents only about 20% of GDP. Let's break down what makes the services sector so dominant in the modern American economy. Within the services sector, finance leads at 25%, followed closely by healthcare at 23%. Retail contributes 18%, education provides 12%, and other services make up the remaining 22%. This sector dominance reflects America's transition to a post-industrial economy, where knowledge, innovation, and service delivery create more economic value than traditional manufacturing and agriculture. Understanding these sectors helps explain how the modern U.S. economy generates wealth and employment. Consumer spending is the backbone of the American economy, representing approximately 70% of all economic activity in the United States. This massive consumer spending spans across major categories, including housing, transportation, food, and healthcare, creating trillions of dollars in economic activity each year. Consumer confidence plays a crucial role in driving spending decisions. When consumers feel optimistic about their financial future and the overall economy, they are more likely to make major purchases and investments. Income levels and access to credit are fundamental drivers of consumer spending. Higher incomes provide more disposable income for purchases, while credit access allows consumers to spend beyond their immediate cash flow, creating a multiplier effect throughout the economy. Credit access through credit cards and loans enables consumers to make larger purchases like homes, cars, and education, further amplifying their economic impact and driving business growth and job creation. This creates a powerful multiplier effect where consumer spending drives business revenue, which leads to more hiring, higher wages, and increased investment, ultimately generating even more consumer spending and economic growth. Businesses are the backbone of the U.S. economy, ranging from small startups with big dreams to massive corporations that employ millions of people. Businesses exist at every scale. Startups begin with innovative ideas, small businesses serve local communities, and large corporations operate globally, each playing a vital role in economic growth. The production process transforms raw materials and labor into finished goods and services. This fundamental process creates value and drives economic activity throughout the supply chain. Businesses are major job creators, employing over 150 million Americans across diverse sectors. From manufacturing to technology, healthcare to retail, businesses provide the employment that drives consumer spending. Innovation drives long-term economic growth. American businesses invest over $400 billion annually in research and development, creating new technologies, products, and services that improve productivity and living standards. Business investment decisions are influenced by multiple factors. Lower interest rates encourage borrowing for expansion, favorable government policies reduce regulatory burden, strong consumer demand signals growth opportunities, and competitive pressures drive innovation investments. Business investment creates a powerful multiplier effect throughout the economy. Private businesses contribute approximately 70% of U.S. GDP. Every dollar invested by businesses creates jobs, increases consumer spending, and stimulates broader economic growth, making business investment crucial for economic expansion. The government plays three vital economic roles: regulation, spending, and taxation. These functions allow government to shape economic activity, provide essential services, and influence overall economic growth. Government regulation involves setting rules and standards for industries to ensure fair competition, consumer protection, and economic stability. Government spending provides public goods and services that private markets typically cannot deliver efficiently, such as infrastructure, defense, and education. Through taxation, government collects revenue to fund its operations and implement fiscal policies that can influence economic activity. Government regulates key industries to protect consumers and ensure market stability. Banking regulations prevent financial crises, healthcare regulations ensure drug safety, environmental rules control pollution, and transportation standards protect public safety. Government spending focuses on public goods that benefit society as a whole. This includes infrastructure like roads and bridges, national defense, public education, and healthcare programs. Government spending has significant economic impacts. It creates jobs, stimulates economic activity, and can be used as a fiscal policy tool to influence economic growth during recessions or to cool down an overheated economy. Fiscal policy uses government spending and taxation to influence economic activity. During recessions, government increases spending to stimulate growth and create jobs. During periods of rapid growth, government may reduce spending to prevent inflation and economic overheating. Through regulation, spending, and taxation, government plays a crucial role in maintaining economic stability, providing essential services, and guiding long-term economic growth. These tools allow government to respond to changing economic conditions and support overall prosperity. The Federal Reserve, commonly called the Fed, is the central bank of the United States. It plays a crucial role in managing the nation's monetary policy to maintain economic stability. The Fed operates as an independent institution within the government, making decisions about monetary policy without direct political interference. This independence allows it to focus on long-term economic stability rather than short-term political pressures. The Federal Reserve uses several key tools to implement monetary policy. The most important of these is controlling interest rates, particularly the federal funds rate, which influences borrowing costs throughout the economy. When the Fed raises interest rates, borrowing becomes more expensive, which tends to slow economic activity and reduce inflation. When it lowers rates, borrowing becomes cheaper, stimulating economic growth. The Fed also controls the money supply through various mechanisms. By increasing the money supply, the Fed can stimulate economic activity. By reducing it, the Fed can help control inflation. The Federal Reserve operates under a dual mandate from Congress. It must promote maximum employment while maintaining price stability, which means keeping inflation at a target rate of around 2% annually. These two goals sometimes conflict with each other. Policies that boost employment might increase inflation, while measures to control inflation might reduce employment. The Fed must carefully balance these competing objectives. The Federal Reserve's monetary policy decisions have far-reaching effects throughout the entire economy. Changes in interest rates and money supply ripple through financial markets, businesses, and consumers. When the Fed changes monetary policy, it affects banks' lending rates, business investment decisions, consumer spending patterns, and financial market performance. These interconnected effects demonstrate why the Federal Reserve is considered one of the most powerful economic institutions in the world. Inflation is one of the most important economic concepts affecting everyone's daily life. It represents the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises, causing purchasing power to decline over time. Inflation measures how much more expensive things become over time. When inflation occurs, each dollar in your wallet has less purchasing power than it did before. Here we can see real examples of inflation. A cup of coffee that cost $3 in 2020 now costs $4 in 2024. Similarly, gasoline has increased from $2.40 to $3.20 per gallon. Inflation has three main causes. Demand pull inflation occurs when there's more demand for goods than supply available. Cost push inflation happens when production costs rise and businesses pass these costs to consumers. Monetary inflation results from too much money circulating in the economy. Inflation is measured using the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. The CPI tracks the cost of a market basket containing typical goods and services that consumers buy, including food, housing, transportation, medical care, and education. When the CPI increases from one period to the next, it indicates inflation. For example, if the CPI rises from 100 to 102.5, this represents a 2.5% inflation rate. Inflation affects both consumers and businesses in significant ways. For consumers, inflation reduces purchasing power, increases the cost of living, and particularly hurts those on fixed incomes like retirees. For businesses, inflation brings higher input costs for materials and labor, forces difficult pricing decisions, and makes long-term planning more challenging due to economic uncertainty. Understanding inflation is crucial for making informed economic decisions. Remember that inflation reduces purchasing power, is measured by the CPI, has multiple causes, and affects different groups in various ways. This knowledge helps you better navigate economic changes in your personal and professional life. Unemployment is a critical economic indicator that measures the health of the job market. Understanding how unemployment is calculated and its different types helps us gauge economic conditions. The unemployment rate is calculated by dividing the number of unemployed people by the total labor force, then multiplying by 100 to get a percentage. For example, if 6.2 million people are unemployed out of a labor force of 164.6 million, the unemployment rate would be 3.8%. To understand unemployment, we must first understand the labor force. The labor force includes all people aged 16 and older who are either employed or unemployed but actively seeking work. It excludes retirees, students, and others not seeking employment. There are four main types of unemployment. Frictional unemployment occurs when people are temporarily between jobs during normal job transitions. This is considered natural and healthy in a dynamic economy. Structural unemployment happens when workers' skills don't match available jobs, often due to technological changes or shifts in the economy. This type requires retraining or education to resolve. Cyclical unemployment rises during economic downturn and recessions when overall demand for goods and services falls. This type typically decreases as the economy recovers. Seasonal unemployment occurs predictably at certain times of the year due to weather patterns or holiday cycles, such as in agriculture, construction, or retail industries. Unemployment has significant economic implications. The current unemployment rate helps policymakers and economists assess economic health and make important decisions about monetary and fiscal policy. Low unemployment, typically between 2 and 4%, indicates a strong economy, but may lead to wage inflation as employers compete for workers. High unemployment, above 8%, signals economic weakness, and increases government spending on unemployment benefits. Economists consider a natural rate of unemployment between 4 and 6% to be healthy, as it includes normal frictional and structural unemployment without indicating economic distress. The stock market serves as a barometer of economic health, reflecting investor confidence and expectations about future economic performance. When investors are optimistic about the economy, stock prices tend to rise, and when they're pessimistic, prices fall. Think of the stock market as an economic barometer. Just like a weather barometer measures atmospheric pressure, the stock market measures economic pressure through investor sentiment and confidence levels. But how exactly are stock prices determined? Stock prices are set by the fundamental forces of supply and demand in the marketplace. When more investors want to buy a stock than sell it, demand exceeds supply and the price rises. Conversely, when more investors want to sell than buy, supply exceeds demand and the price falls. The intersection of supply and demand determines the market price. The stock market doesn't just reflect economic conditions, it actively influences them through two main channels: business investment decisions and consumer spending behavior. When stock prices rise, businesses find it easier and cheaper to raise capital by issuing new shares. This increased access to funding encourages business expansion, new projects, and job creation. Rising stock prices also create a wealth effect for consumers. When people see their investment portfolios growing, they feel more confident about their financial situation and tend to spend more money, boosting economic activity. This creates a feedback loop. A strong stock market encourages business investment and consumer spending, which strengthens the economy, which in turn supports higher stock prices. Conversely, a falling market can reduce confidence and slow economic growth. Understanding this relationship helps explain why economists and policymakers closely monitor stock market performance as an indicator of economic health and future economic activity. International trade is the exchange of goods and services between the United States and other countries around the world. This trade relationship is fundamental to the modern U.S. economy. Trade occurs between the United States and many countries worldwide, including major trading partners like China, Canada, and Mexico. Imports are goods and services that the United States purchases from other countries. These include everything from consumer electronics to raw materials. Major U.S. imports include electronics worth about $400 billion annually, oil and energy products worth $180 billion, and clothing worth $90 billion per year. Exports are goods and services that the United States sells to other countries. These represent American production and innovation sold worldwide. Major U.S. exports include agricultural products worth $170 billion, aircraft worth $130 billion, and technology services worth $200 billion annually. The trade balance is calculated by subtracting imports from exports. When imports exceed exports, the country has a trade deficit. The United States currently runs a trade deficit, importing about $2.4 trillion worth of goods while exporting $1.7 trillion, resulting in a deficit of $700 billion. International trade has both positive and negative effects on the U.S. economy, affecting consumers, businesses, and workers in different ways. Trade benefits consumers through lower prices and greater variety, while also providing businesses access to materials and markets. However, it can also lead to job displacement in certain industries and create economic dependencies. Understanding international trade is crucial for grasping how the U.S. economy connects with the global marketplace and how trade policies affect economic growth and employment. Fiscal policy is one of the government's most powerful tools for managing the economy. It involves using government spending and taxation to influence economic activity, employment, and growth. Fiscal policy works through two primary mechanisms. First, government spending injects money directly into the economy through infrastructure projects, social programs, and public services. Second, taxation removes money from the economy, reducing the amount available for private spending and investment. By adjusting these two levers, the government can stimulate or cool down economic activity. When the government increases spending, money flows from the Treasury directly into the economy. This spending goes toward infrastructure projects, healthcare, education, and defense, creating jobs and boosting economic activity. Taxation works in the opposite direction. When the government raises taxes, money flows out of the economy and into government revenue. This reduces the amount of money available for private spending and investment, helping to cool down an overheated economy. The relationship between government spending and tax revenue determines the budget balance. When government spending exceeds tax revenue, we have a budget deficit. This means the government is injecting more money into the economy than it's removing. Conversely, when tax revenue exceeds government spending, we have a budget surplus. This removes more money from the economy than it injects, which can help reduce inflation and slow economic growth. Fiscal policy has measurable effects on economic growth. Expansionary fiscal policy, which increases spending or cuts taxes, typically stimulates GDP growth by boosting aggregate demand. Contractionary fiscal policy, which reduces spending or raises taxes, typically slows GDP growth but can help control inflation and prevent economic overheating. The government must carefully balance these tools to maintain stable, sustainable growth. Fiscal policy remains a crucial tool for economic management, allowing governments to respond to recessions, control inflation, and promote long-term economic stability through strategic use of spending and taxation. Supply and demand are the fundamental forces that drive all market economies. These two concepts determine the prices we pay for everything from coffee to housing, and understanding them is essential for grasping how the economy works. Let's start with demand. Demand represents how much of a product consumers are willing and able to buy at different price levels. The demand curve slopes downward because as prices increase, people generally buy less of that product. Now let's look at supply. Supply represents how much of a product producers are willing and able to sell at different price levels. The supply curve slopes upward because as prices increase, producers are motivated to make and sell more of that product. When we put supply and demand together, they intersect at a point called market equilibrium. This is where the quantity that consumers want to buy exactly equals the quantity that producers want to sell. The price at this intersection is called the equilibrium price. Now let's see what happens when demand changes. If demand increases, perhaps due to higher consumer income or changing preferences, the entire demand curve shifts to the right. This creates a new equilibrium with both higher prices and higher quantities. Similarly, when supply changes, it affects the market equilibrium. If supply increases, perhaps due to improved technology or lower production costs, the supply curve shifts to the right, resulting in lower prices but higher quantities available in the market. These supply and demand dynamics play out constantly in the real economy. When gas prices rise, it might be due to decreased supply from oil-producing countries or increased demand from economic growth. When housing prices increase in a city, it often reflects high demand from population growth combined with limited housing supply. Understanding supply and demand helps explain price movements throughout the economy. When you see prices changing for goods and services, you can often trace it back to shifts in either supply or demand. This fundamental relationship drives market efficiency and helps allocate resources where they're most needed and valued. Economic growth is the foundation of rising living standards and prosperity. It represents the increase in the production of goods and services in an economy over time. Economic growth means an economy is producing more goods and services than it did in previous periods. This expansion creates jobs, increases incomes, and improves overall quality of life. We can measure economic growth by tracking gross domestic product over time. This chart shows how the U.S. economy has expanded from about $10 trillion in 2000 to over $23 trillion today. Economic growth doesn't happen automatically. It's driven by several key factors that work together to expand an economy's productive capacity. Technological innovation is a primary driver of economic growth. New technologies like computers, the internet, and artificial intelligence allow us to produce more goods and services with the same amount of resources. Investment in human capital through education, training, and skill development is equally important. A more educated and skilled workforce can use technology more effectively and innovate new solutions. Physical capital investment in machinery, buildings, and infrastructure provides the tools and facilities needed for increased production. Modern factories and equipment enable workers to be more productive. Entrepreneurship drives growth by creating new businesses, products, and services. Entrepreneurs identify opportunities and organize resources to meet market demands, often introducing innovations that boost productivity. These growth factors work together in a reinforcing cycle. Investment leads to innovation, which increases productivity, which drives economic growth, which generates more resources for further investment. Economic growth is essential for improving living standards and creating opportunities. It results from the combined effects of technological advancement, skilled workers, productive capital, and entrepreneurial innovation all working together to expand what an economy can produce. Business cycles represent the natural rise and fall of economic activity over time. These cyclical fluctuations are a normal part of how market economies function, creating periods of growth followed by periods of decline. Every business cycle consists of 4 distinct phases. During expansion, the economy grows as businesses increase production, hire more workers, and consumer spending rises. This leads to higher GDP growth and falling unemployment. The expansion eventually reaches a peak, the highest point of economic activity in the cycle. At this stage, the economy is operating at or near full capacity. Unemployment is at its lowest, but inflationary pressures begin to build. After the peak comes contraction, also known as a recession, when it lasts 6 months or more. Economic activity declines, businesses reduce production and lay off workers, leading to rising unemployment and falling GDP growth. The contraction eventually reaches a trough, the lowest point of the cycle. From here, the economy begins to recover as conditions stabilize and the foundation is set for the next expansion phase. Business cycles are caused by various factors. Changes in consumer and business confidence affect spending and investment. Monetary policy decisions by the Federal Reserve influence interest rates and credit availability. External shocks like oil price changes, natural disasters, or global economic events can also trigger cycle changes. Technological innovations can create new growth opportunities or disrupt existing industries. The impact of business cycles on employment and inflation follows predictable patterns. During expansions, job creation accelerates and unemployment falls, but inflation tends to rise as demand increases faster than supply. During recessions, the opposite occurs. Unemployment rises as businesses cut costs, but inflationary pressures ease as demand weakens. Understanding these patterns helps policymakers and businesses prepare for and respond to economic changes. Productivity measures how efficiently we use resources to produce goods and services. It's a fundamental driver of economic growth and higher living standards. Productivity is calculated as output divided by input. The most common measure is labor productivity, which shows how much goods and services are produced per hour of work. Here's a simple example of productivity improvement. In the first scenario, 4 workers produce 6 units of output, giving us 1.5 units per worker. After productivity improvements through better technology and processes, only 2 workers can now produce 12 units of output. This gives us 6 units per worker, 4 times more productive. U.S. labor productivity has grown significantly over the past 70 years. This chart shows how productivity has more than quadrupled since 1950, meaning workers today produce much more per hour than previous generations. Higher productivity directly leads to higher living standards. When workers produce more per hour, companies can afford to pay higher wages, and the economy produces more goods and services for everyone. 3 main factors drive productivity growth. Technology improvements, like automation and artificial intelligence, help workers produce more. Education and skills training make workers more capable and efficient. Capital investment in better equipment and infrastructure also boosts productivity. When these 3 factors work together, they create a powerful engine for economic growth and prosperity. Government regulation acts like a referee in the economic game, establishing rules that businesses and markets must follow to ensure fairness, safety, and stability. There are three main types of government regulation that affect the economy. First, environmental protection ensures businesses operate without harming our air, water, and natural resources. Second, consumer safety regulations protect people from dangerous products and ensure food, drugs, and other goods meet safety standards before reaching the market. Third, financial stability regulations oversee banks, investment firms, and markets to prevent fraud and maintain confidence in the financial system. Regulation provides several important benefits to the economy and society. It protects consumers from harmful products, prevents environmental damage, and ensures fair competition in markets. However, regulation also comes with costs. Businesses must spend money to comply with rules, which can increase prices for consumers and potentially slow innovation and economic growth. The key challenge in regulation is finding the right balance. Too little regulation can lead to market failures and harm consumers, while too much regulation can stifle business growth and innovation. Effective regulation strikes a balance between protecting the public interest and allowing markets to function efficiently. The labor market is where workers sell their time and skills to employers in exchange for wages. Like any market, it operates on the fundamental principles of supply and demand. Labor supply represents all the workers willing and able to work at different wage levels. Generally, as wages increase, more people are willing to work, creating an upward sloping supply curve. Labor demand represents how many workers employers want to hire at different wage levels. As wages increase, employers typically demand fewer workers, creating a downward sloping demand curve. The intersection of supply and demand determines the equilibrium wage and employment level. This is where the number of workers willing to work equals the number of workers employers want to hire. Several factors influence labor supply. Education and skills are major determinants. Workers with higher education and specialized skills can command higher wages and are more likely to participate in the labor force. Demographics also play a crucial role in labor supply. Age affects participation rates, with prime working age adults having the highest participation. Gender, family responsibilities, and geographic location all influence who works and for how much. On the demand side, employers' need for workers depends on business conditions, technology, and productivity. When businesses grow or new technologies create new job categories, labor demand increases. Conversely, automation can reduce demand for certain types of workers. Understanding the labor market helps explain wage differences across occupations, regions, and time periods. It also helps policymakers design programs for education, training, and employment that can improve economic outcomes for workers and businesses alike. Income inequality refers to the uneven distribution of income and wealth across different groups in society. It measures the gap between the highest and lowest earners in an economy. This pyramid shows how wealth is distributed in the United States. The top 1% of Americans control 32% of all wealth, while the bottom 50% own just 2%. Several factors contribute to income inequality. Education gaps create different earning potentials. Technology favors skilled workers. Globalization affects job markets. Policy changes in taxation and regulation play a role. Market forces determine wages and returns on investments. Income inequality has several negative consequences for society. It reduces economic mobility, making it harder for people to move up the income ladder. It creates social tension and reduces social cohesion. It can also lead to slower overall economic growth. Policymakers have several tools to address income inequality. Progressive taxation can redistribute wealth. Investment in education and training helps workers develop skills. Minimum wage policies can raise earnings for low-income workers. Social safety nets provide support for those in need. Ensuring equal opportunity helps level the playing field for all citizens. Income inequality remains one of the most significant economic challenges facing modern societies. Understanding its causes and consequences helps us evaluate potential policy solutions and work toward a more equitable distribution of economic opportunities. The national debt represents the total amount of money that the United States government owes to creditors. This debt accumulates when government spending exceeds revenue year after year. When the government spends more money than it collects in taxes and other revenue, it creates an annual deficit. These deficits accumulate over time to form the national debt. The national debt has grown dramatically over the past 4 decades. From just $1 trillion in 1980, it has increased to over $27 trillion by 2020. To understand the scale of the national debt, consider that it represents about $94,000 for every U.S. citizen. The debt to GDP ratio has reached 130%, meaning we owe more than our entire annual economic output. The national debt creates significant implications for future generations. As debt grows, future taxpayers may face higher taxes, reduced government services, and a larger portion of the federal budget dedicated to interest payments rather than productive investments. The national debt represents one of the most significant long-term challenges facing the U.S. economy. Understanding its scale and implications helps us appreciate the importance of fiscal responsibility and sustainable government finance. Economic indicators serve as vital gauges that help us measure the health and performance of the economy. Just like a doctor uses various tests to assess a patient's health, economists use key indicators to diagnose the economic condition. The first major indicator is gross domestic product, or GDP growth. This measures how fast the economy is expanding by tracking the total value of all goods and services produced. A healthy economy typically shows steady GDP growth between 2 to 4% annually. The second key indicator is the inflation rate, which measures how quickly prices are rising across the economy. The Federal Reserve typically targets around 2% inflation as a sign of a healthy, growing economy. Too high means prices are rising too fast, while too low might signal economic weakness. The third crucial indicator is the unemployment rate, which shows the percentage of people actively looking for work but unable to find jobs. Full employment is generally considered to be around 4 to 5% unemployment, as some job turnover is normal in a dynamic economy. Understanding how to interpret these indicators is crucial for assessing economic health. A healthy economy typically shows moderate GDP growth, stable inflation around the Federal Reserve's target, and unemployment in the full employment range. Warning signs appear when indicators move outside their healthy ranges. This might include very slow or very rapid GDP growth, inflation that's too high or too low, or rising unemployment above normal levels. Economic crisis conditions are indicated by negative GDP growth, which means the economy is shrinking, extremely high inflation or deflation, and high unemployment rates that signal widespread job losses. Economic indicators don't work in isolation. They're interconnected and influence each other. Strong GDP growth can lead to lower unemployment, but might also increase inflation. Policymakers and economists analyze these indicators together to get a complete picture of economic health and make informed decisions about monetary and fiscal policy. The future of the U.S. economy will be shaped by three major forces: technological change, globalization, and demographic shifts. Each presents both challenges and opportunities. Technological change, particularly artificial intelligence and automation, will fundamentally reshape the American workforce. While some jobs will be displaced, new opportunities in tech, healthcare, and green energy will emerge. Technology will drive significant productivity gains, potentially increasing economic output by 2.5% annually. This could boost living standards if the benefits are widely shared. Globalization presents both opportunities and challenges. While international trade creates economic benefits, it also increases competition and supply chain vulnerabilities, as seen during recent global disruptions. The future will likely see a shift toward more resilient supply chains, with some manufacturing returning to North America to reduce dependencies on distant suppliers. America's aging population creates significant economic challenges. By 2030, all baby boomers will be over 65, creating a smaller workforce, supporting more retirees, and increasing healthcare costs. These demographic changes will require policy adaptations, including potential immigration reform, retirement age adjustments, and healthcare system improvements to maintain economic growth. These three forces don't operate in isolation. Technology can help address demographic challenges through automation. Globalization affects how quickly new technologies spread. Demographics influence both technological adoption and global competitiveness. The future success of the U.S. economy will depend on how well the nation adapts to these changes through innovation, education, smart policymaking, and maintaining its competitive advantages in a rapidly evolving global landscape. Throughout this series, we've explored the many components that make up the U.S. economy. Now it's time to see how they all fit together to create the big picture. We've learned about consumers who drive demand, businesses that produce goods and services, and government that provides regulation and spending. We've explored the Federal Reserve's role in monetary policy, the stock market as an economic barometer, and how international trade connects us globally. We've examined labor markets, economic indicators, and the cycles that characterize economic activity. But here's the crucial insight. These components don't operate in isolation. They're all interconnected, constantly influencing and responding to each other. This interconnected system creates a dynamic, ever-changing economic environment that affects every aspect of our daily lives. Understanding economics helps you make better decisions about your career, investments, spending, and financial planning. Economic forces shape everything from the price of your morning coffee to the availability of jobs in your field. Here are the key takeaways. Economics affects your daily decisions. All economic components are interconnected. Understanding patterns helps you predict changes, and this knowledge empowers you to make better financial choices. The economy may seem complex, but by understanding its fundamental components and relationships, you're better equipped to navigate an ever-changing economic landscape. You now have the tools to understand the economic forces that shape our world. Use this knowledge wisely to make informed decisions and build a better financial future.